Behold, I am Mysterio, here to save the world from the evils of technology corrupting the human spirit.
Are we being punked?
So, back in October of last year, I talked about one of my favorite iterations of the Batman, which was the Batman. And recently I got into the thick of things by going through some older stuff I used to watch a few years ago. The Batman I watched earlier last year, and recently...
Oops, one too many.
But that's for another time. Another show, and obviously what we're talking about, is the Spectacular Spider-Man.
Spectacular, spectacular Spider-Man. Spectacular, spectacular
Spider-Man. It's catchy.
Released in 2008, which was 17 years ago, the Spectacular Spider-Man, as the name would suggest, covers the early career of the iconic webhead, getting used to his powers, fighting crime, and trying to keep up with all the social obligations that a teenager has, and then some. The series was directed by Victor Cook and Greg Weisman, the former known for his work on Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, and the latter having directed Gargoyles and Young Justice. Each of these shows having a cult following, and I'm just going off some of the more prominent works, otherwise this video will be nothing but name drops here and there. Spectacular Spider-Man has 2 seasons to its name, and I figured that much like the Batman, I figured I'd take some time and talk about the series, a series that I think is severely underappreciated and was gypped out of a lot of potential for future seasons. Spoilers for Spectacular Spider-Man! Initially airing on Kids WB, The Spectacular Spider-Man focuses on the younger life of Peter Parker a few months after the iconic bite. I don't need to go over the origins of Spider-Man, mainly because the webhead is probably one of, if not the most recognizable superheroes of all time, along with his origins and story. But just in case, Spider Bite, got powers, tried to make money with powers, dead uncle, great power, great responsibility, blah blah blah, you know this song and dance. Well, unless we're talking about Japanese Spider-Man. It's pretty much well known since the tale as old as, well, probably more than my viewing audience. But let's really get into the thick of things. You'll probably notice that this time around, Spidey and the art design have really gone for a much more simple art style. The friendly neighborhood Spider, when animated, isn't a stranger to different animated stylings, but typically the dominant art style for the web slinger tends to be the more realistic, with a lot more definition of the characters. I'm not saying that Spectacular Spider-Man's art direction is bad, quite the opposite really. In fact, thanks to the simplified designs, it allows the show to have a lot more leeway with its action scenes.
Good thing I refilled the web shooters.
Now, I'm not saying this is the best animated fight show, but it's clear to me, especially 17 years ago, there was a lot of care and effort put into the show's presentation and action. Plus, the art style actually did a great job of making every character look unique, and the show does one thing that I always appreciate when it comes to fight scenes, and that's actually using the environment in the fights. Not only does it lend a lot more memorable scenes to it, but it makes every encounter unique since it plays up with the environment, which really goes to show the versatility of not only Spider-Man, but even at times his rogues gallery. While I wouldn't say the art style is my particular niche, it's something that I do really appreciate and love the presentation of the fights since it can be crisp and clean at times. Like, not to put down the 90s cartoon of Spider-Man, but one thing you notice is that they reuse, and I mean a lot, of previously animated scenes in it. Now, like I said, I'm not demonizing it to put Spectacular Spider-Man on a pedestal, but mostly to point out as far as I'm aware, that really isn't a thing in this show. I'm pretty sure all the scenes, save for flashbacks, which are intentionally designed to reuse animation, are original and it plays to the show's strength. Though, with a Spider-Man show, you gotta have a great voice for the lead character. A voice that's not only smooth, but can have a great amount of range going from awkward teenager to snarky jester. So for Peter Parker and Spider-Man, they went with...
If you're not the boss, then die.
Good old Josh Keaton. Gonna be legit, you know how some characters just have that one iconic voice actor that just sticks with you and you can't really picture anyone else taking that role? Keaton is my Spider-Man. He really does an accurate job of what I think Peter Parker and Spider-Man should sound and act like, and nails it really well.
It's for your own safety, Pickle Puss.
Of course, that isn't to say the other voice actors don't do a good job or aren't notable. Harry Osborn is voiced by... By the way, for people thinking I'm putting down the laugh, no, it's literally just a clip playing. Don't read too much into it. Gwen Stacy is portrayed by Lacey Chabert.
you guys having a psychic conversation? Because I can't decide if that's cool or really rude.
Shut up, Meg!
J. Jonah Jameson with Darren Norris.
Dear my whimsy!
And I can only imagine the people who are just listening to this whole thing on their draw tablets and they just hear these voices of characters from iconic shows. Well, it's your fault for not actually watching the screen. I'd go for other voice actors, but I'm sure you guys can recognize a few voices on their own.
Call me Rhino!
Am I really gonna defile this grave for money? Of course I am!
Slow down, Tiger. It's not like we're going steady or something equally primitive.
Though one I will personally enjoy is Peter McNichol as Dr. Octopus.
We simply engineer a situation that forces Spider-Man to play the hero.
And I find it funny because he also is one of my favorite characters of all time.
The crest on Birdman's helmet! And I can do anything because I'm a winner!
Look, Doc Ock can be all menacing and such in this show, but again, I'm cursed to know that he shares the same voice actor as X the Eliminator. But getting back on point, the show has a good presentation with not only animation and character design, but also with the voice cast. All the characters sound good and resonate with the designs. And I think it's because that also resonated with a lot of people because this series draws a lot from the early Stan Lee and Ditko era of comics, taking a lot from the actual comics and making its own blend. There are a lot of callbacks to previous Spider-Man media too, including the Sam Raimi films, which did have a lot of scenes that were recreated in this show. Shame we never got this one. And if you disagree with me on that one, I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye. Point is that there's a lot going on with the presentation and design work, and it really displays it well. But presentation can only get you so far. What about the story and characters? When it comes to the story of Spectacular Spider-Man, it does have a few beats that have been treaded on before. You know the usual of Spider-Man if you are familiar with his story. They tend to focus on the responsibility of juggling the powers and trying to have a social life of a junior level teenager. Hell, in the 2 seasons that we do get, we also didn't get to the introduction of Spidey's rogue gallery, including the Sinister Six, Tombstone, the Green Goblin, and even... The other thing I'll say in that regard is that it feels like there are times where the show is trying to do a lot. Kinda. It does have a fair bit of pacing to it that makes it so it doesn't drag, and even makes that one issue that I do have with the story not really an issue because everything goes at a decent pace. Not too fast, not too slow. And here's the thing, not long ago I talked about the combination of serialization and episodic, and Spectacular Spider-Man does have an ongoing story, but each of the episodes have their own plots to them and has a build-up to the subplot, which is what you want to do if you have those kinds of shows in your medium. Take for example the relationship between Peter and Eddie Brock. The two lost their parents in the same plane crash, and have a brotherly relationship, which was rekindled when Peter and Gwen were getting internships at Doc Connor's lab.
Hey, Gwen.
Bro, what are you doing here?
Work here. I'm the Connor's personal lab assistant.
Eddie Brock's a freshman.
College freshman, little man.
The show does a good job of establishing their relationship, how Eddie would defend Peter from bullies and their connection. And then it begins to test that relationship when Peter is trying to juggle not only his duties as Spider-Man, but also trying to get money for his Aunt May. Which when Doc Connors becomes the Lizard, Peter, while as Spider-Man, takes pictures of the incident and sold them to the Daily Bugle, which did strain the relationship slightly. Still, realistically, Eddie still forgave Peter somewhat. However, as the story goes on, we see that a relationship strained over the course of the first season.
Why are you? Because I still remember what a great lady she is. When Gwen told me Aunt May was here, I figured it was worth stomaching you for her sake. I mean, why would you be here? She's only the woman who raised you.
Then, when the symbiote is delivered to Doc Connor's lab and gets stolen by Spider-Man, the situation gets worse for Eddie. He loses his job, which is pretty much ruining any semblance of a life Eddie had since he needed that job to survive. I mean, he is a freshman in college. In New York. God, the rent alone must be killing him. And when Spider-Man returns the symbiote and tries to kill it, it bonds with Eddie to form Venom.
Eddie Brock, we sense your fury, and its taste is sweet. Do you hate the spider? You have to ask. No. But we have much to show.
Pete is Spider-Man. I don't have 2 enemies. I have 1.
We have one enemy.
Together, we will have our desire.
Yes!
We will have vengeance on Spider-Man!
And during all this, there are other events and characters that really do build up quite a bit of an ongoing story, having multiple cogs and pieces turning at the same time. Hell, two of the first characters we actually see in the show, Flint Marko and Alex O'Hearn, a couple of bumbling thieves, they later on come back to their more iconic namesakes, Sandman and Rhino respectively.
See? It's not so bad. Not so bad? Stuff happens. You got power no one else got. Now you can get revenge for all those times the webhead put you behind bars.
Yeah. Nah, wait. Revenge is for chumps.
Revenge is underrated. That felt awesome.
By the by, yeah, that is John DiMaggio talking to John DiMaggio. Just throw in Jake and Bender in there and we got ourselves a really good party. Back on point, these two were created by Norman Osborn and Dr. Otto Octavius in order to provide supervillains for the first major antagonist in the first season, Tombstone. And if you know anything about those two names in Spider-Man, you know exactly where their roles will go. It gets even more wild when Venom tries to get a job from Tombstone.
It appears you have a job opening. We'll take it.
I really should start locking those windows.
While I'm not going super deep into the plots or such, I am doing so because while there is a web of threads around Spider-Man, pun intended, it's because there are also so many moving parts around it's hard to really pin down everything in a summarization and not spoil everything. Let's look at another character dynamic. Most people who are familiar with the Sam Raimi films that are aware in that continuity, it was Flint Marko who took the life of Ben Parker. Well, in this continuity, there's a different take on this involving another character.
You made a pretty good team. Maybe you should change sides. Okay, then why did you help me?
You really don't know.
Yeah, Black Cat. But it wasn't her who took Uncle Ben's life. It was her father.
For years, the cat burglar took pride in never hurting anyone. I never even carried a gun. But as I got older, I got slower. And I became afraid. I made a horrible mistake the night I ended Ben Parker's life. And I know I have to pay for my crime, so I'll turn on the gas.
That won't make us even. You're not forgiven.
I understand.
Now, I'm not going to pretend that I'm a walking, talking encyclopedia of Spider-Man plot lines or relationship connections, but I found this one to be a very unique take on the mythos. Spider-Man as a character has a lot of dynamics with the rest of his cast, no matter what the iteration we're talking about here. And playing around with these established events with how characters are and who did what is something I can appreciate with different iterations of established characters. Not for naught, but Spectacular Spider-Man does a really good job of using its characters for full effect and at the very least creating an interesting web with the relationships working. Almost every character has a purpose, and it's not like it's taking anything from the other characters. I'm not saying every villain or character is stellar. Hell, if I'm being honest, in my opinion, some of the weaker villains are the ones who don't really have a connection to Spidey in one way or another, such as Kraven the Hunter, who mostly just comes out of nowhere to hunt the webhead, becomes one of the ugliest furry characters I've ever seen, and then just gets recruited to the Sinister Six afterwards. But regardless of that, the characters that get a lot more time and development do actually make a lot of sense, like Harry Osborn. It's established early on that despite him being in a better life position than Peter, after all, the kid's rich, bitch, he has some envy of Peter, and that's because of one person, Norman Osborn. This pushes Harry to do other things in order to improve, even going so far as to steal an experimental drug, and this leads to...
Where did this come from? Globulin Green. An early-stage experimental performance enhancer. You stole it from Oscorp, didn't you? Why would you do something so dangerous? So stupid!
For you! You told me to man up! So I took the green to become the son you always wanted me to be. To become a man. Like you.
An interesting plot twist. It's revealed to the audience that the Green Goblin throughout Season 1 was actually Harry Osborn and not Norman. And that's all I'm going to say about that part. But my point is that the show really knows how to utilize its characters, delving into the conflicts between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Plus, while there were jokes and sometimes breaking the fourth wall here and there,
with guards wrapped up all neat and tidy, I help or herd my dear friend Spidey. I'm in a rhyming mood tonight.
It never really got in the way of the serious stuff. The show knows when to put a joke and when to be serious.
I never asked to be Spider-Man. I never asked for these powers. I never knew it would mean a bashed up hand, a hard 9 p.m. curfew, no job, and friends who all think I'm scum. It was all just a twist of fate. Bad luck, a random bug bite.
Not to mention, sometimes, while simple, the funny bits can be quite funny.
If you think you're beast enough to come and get it.
Oh, I'll show you who's beast enough.
Here, you're gonna need this.
I hate you so much.
And it had its moments for the villains as well, giving them inklings of something deeper happening.
Mr. Sandman?
Yes? Don't mention.
My point is that the show was really, really good. It modernized the Spider-Man characters and mythos in a way that was really entertaining, and how modernization should be done for a classic series, playing around with the situations of the characters but keeping their true actual personalities and goals intact while putting them in a more modern setting. I'm only going this far to explain it because despite the fact it only got 2 seasons and ended on a cliffhanger, I am not going to show or explain. It's still worth your time to get into because the show is generally that good. But let's focus on the fact it only had 2 seasons, shall we? Now you may be thinking, if the show is so good, and there are plenty of other people online who believe it is if you just take one look on YouTube, why are there only 2 seasons of this? Well, as it turns out, there were plans for a few other seasons, with other notable Spider-Man villains such as the Scorpion, the Hobgoblin, and of course, Carnage were planned. Hell, if you look hard enough, you'd know that there are cameos for some of these characters. Cletus Cassidy was there in the 3rd episode of Season 3, and Mac Gargan, the OG name for the Scorpion, was mentioned by Jameson as a private investigator. Greg Weisman himself even said that there were minor characters who were intended to be cameos for the fans to find in the earlier seasons. Other plans included using the Kingpin as the big bad instead of Tombstone, but since Marvel had Wilson Fisk as the arch enemy of Daredevil, Sony wasn't able to acquire the rights to use him. But keep that in mind because it'll be important for what we're about to dive into. There were also plans for there being a dedicated spin-off series of Spectacular Spider-Man reach Season 3, one that focused on Venom, possibly having an anti-hero based team that included the Prowler and Silver Sable. Of course, Weisman also expressed that he wanted to have other Marvel heroes integrated into the show and possibly making their own dedicated spin-offs, Fantastic Four, Avengers, and even the X-Men, which, with this level of artistic design and dedication to focusing on the character relationships, I wouldn't have been opposed to any of that. But what exactly happened to stop all of that? Well, while I can't say for sure with anything nowadays because that's the nature of the beast, especially with contractual obligations, one can easily check off stuff like ratings, quality, or there being drama behind the scenes of the show. From my extensive research, the biggest issue would be the timing of things. The show came out in 2008, and if you guys know anything about what happened in 2009, well, I'm sure you can recall one of the dreaded events of our history. Yep. The Marvel acquisition of Disney. It's really simple when you think about it because the moment that happened, Sony lost the television rights to the Spider-Man intellectual property, which in turn resulted in the sudden cancellation of Spectacular Spider-Man. It's as simple as that, and it's not like Marvel or Disney couldn't have continued the series. Hell, Weisman even stated in an interview, Marvel can now produce the series, but of course, they don't have to. And well, 17 years later, I think it's safe to say that we have our answer. Though I do want to point out it wasn't just because of Disney that this happened. As much as I have a great dislike for the Rats company for its shitty business practices and horrible slop they keep producing, though I think this one is really relevant to what we're talking about with this topic, there's a bit more out there because there's always the possibility that Sony still owed the specifics of Spectacular Spider-Man, like the designs and storyline. So even if Marvel and Disney want to continue, there's always the possibility of legal issues being there. I can't really prove any of that, so I have to do the annoying YouTuber thing and say allegedly. Regardless of that, it's a fact that after the Disney acquisition, the Spectacular Spider-Man was only going to be stuck at 2 seasons with a cliffhanger ending. But for what we got, I still say it was a refreshing ride for the character. Still, if you agree that Disney sucks and that Spectacular Spider-Man should have been continued, put down in the comments, screw Disney! Lets me know you made it this far in the video. And hey, it's always fun to say that in order to get back at the rat.
I'm Spider-Man. No more. No more.
I'll end this video with a simple message. Go watch The Spectacular Spider-Man. Trust me, even though the story is technically incomplete, there's enough content to at the very least have a fun weekend and enjoy yourself. There was a lot of love and respect poured into the series to make something that was truly magical, and it's a big shame that the show was cut down before it could really spread its web. Cut down by some corporate BS. But isn't that life nowadays? Where something really enjoyable is cut down before it can really take flight? All because profits and legal mumbo jumbo come in and screw with it? Still, that just tells me to enjoy what we have and when we can. And even though it was cut down in its prime, I'm still glad the Spectacular Spider-Man was made. Sure, it didn't break new ground, but it didn't have to. A product, if it can do something really well, doesn't have to actually bring something new to the table. It just has to be really good. Spider-Man as a character and mythos has a lot of great potential to it, and depending on who you ask and what we're talking about, you'll have some bangers like Spider-Verse, some less than stellar stuff like the newer things that we've been getting, or even the garbage like One More Day. Don't even bother looking it up, trust me, you'll thank me later. I don't hate the current Spider-Man stuff, but with stuff like Insomniac Spider-Man 2 or even the new show that came out that just really didn't click with me, I don't know, I've just become a bit more distanced from the webhead, which sucks because I'm sure a lot of people grew up with Spidey in one way or another. The comics, the cartoons, or if you're like me, the video games.
Good thing Black Cat gave me a call, son. Looks like just in time.
Hey, Spidey, can you get us Captain America's autograph?
Regardless, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm MangaKamen, and
Hey, loosen up, kids! I'm on fire!
what kind of clip is that to end on? It has to be done properly and not end on something so vague and so